Hello there, good morning. Welcome to Good Morning Transfers. 14 days to go in the window, and there is so much that could still happen. Chelsea's spending set to continue with Romeo Lavia's arrival imminent. Also, Liverpool, they're hoping still to bolster their squad, while Tottenham could see several players depart. And what about Everton too? They may have a new striker coming in. Plenty to discuss this morning. Sam Abaski's here, Harriet Price here, and Flex is with us as well. And don't forget, if you're watching at home, wherever you are, join the conversation. Use the hashtag #TransferTalk. Good morning, everybody. Let's start with Chelsea, shall we? Waiting for an announcement of Romeo Lavia's move from Southampton. Any update this morning for Chelsea fans waiting to find out the latest, Harriet?
No update just yet. Chelsea fans have to wait a little bit longer to get the news that they were after, but we do know that the medical was completed yesterday. That 53 million plus 5 million add-on fees has been agreed. So we are expecting an announcement on this player later today. Remember as well that they have to get him announced and confirmed before the 12 p.m. deadline if they would like to play him this weekend. Although they've got plenty of options, haven't they?
I knew that was going to come in.
There was no shade. It's a good thing. They've got plenty of options to work with, but they would have to get him registered before that 12 p.m. deadline. Are expecting an announcement later today. We're also going to be hearing from the Southampton manager, Russell Martin, and he might provide an update as well later.
Took you 20 seconds for
There was no shade. There was no shade.
Mauricio Pochettino as well is going to be talking this afternoon from 1 o'clock. You'll hear him a little bit later on Total Football here on Sky Sports News. Let's talk a little bit more about Chelsea. Well, kind of Chelsea, but a little bit of Crystal Palace as well. Yesterday afternoon, we had the shock news really out of nowhere that Crystal Palace and Steve Parish in particular announced it himself on Instagram that Chelsea target Michael Olise had signed a new 4-year contract. It came after Chelsea had triggered the release clause, the £35 million release clause. Despite that, neither Palace nor Olise spoke to the club. He then went on to sign that new deal. So how have Palace managed to persuade Olise to stay?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because yesterday on this show we were talking about why a move to Chelsea may or may not work for him. I'll bring you first of all what Roy Hodgson had to say himself, and he said it's the best possible news we could have. His future here is very bright and we can help him move very quickly to another level. I think within that you get a lot of the reasons and motivations behind him staying at Crystal Palace. He's a player that's only 21-year-old who developed so much last season, both in terms of his attacking output. He also looked a lot more defensively solid over the course of the season. I think Crystal Palace would have been able to sell him a bit of a dream this season. You can be a huge part of this starting 11, guaranteed game time week in, week out. You and Eze now, we can really build the team around you. And also, you have to remember as well, a lot of players are going to be looking at the Euros next summer, thinking, are we going to be involved in that squad? He's involved in the under-21s French team. He's got an outside chance of making that Euro squad for next summer, so he thinks if he really impresses over the season ahead, gets regular game time, then maybe I can make that. And he feels that Crystal Palace is the best place in the short term for that development to help him achieve his goals. And who's to say, look, he can't get a move if he wants to another club in maybe next summer or the year after. But Crystal Palace for now have kept and protected their asset, and they'll be really pleased with that, although Chelsea fans might be a bit disappointed in this one because he looks like a huge talent with so much potential.
Yeah, Chelsea fans, if you want to get in touch, you can do. Hashtag transfer talk. I mean, we're used to talking about Chelsea in this transfer window, really nipping in and stealing players off other clubs almost. But it feels unusual for them to be turned down by a player. How does this look for them?
I think it depends on how you look at it. When you look at what Chelsea have done in the transfer window, you can't really be too upset as a Chelsea fan because they've got a lot of their major targets, especially in comparison to last summer when they weren't getting their first targets and they had to go for their third and fourth. But in terms of the profile that Chelsea have been looking at this window, in terms of the age, in terms of Premier League experience, you know, Pochettino said in pre-season he wants Premier League experience in these attacking positions. I think Olise fits that mould quite perfectly, but at the same time, you know, 35 million release clause. Obviously, Crystal Palace didn't want to lose a player with such magnitude and such a big future with that price as well. So it's upsetting, but at the same time, they've been successful for so long, and it also gives Chelsea the opportunity to go for another target. You know, if this was a thing where it would have dragged out, you know, we saw the Caicedo deal, it happened over 3 months, that conversation was going and going on. Now they know he signed a new contract, there's nothing more to it. They can move on to new targets.
Yeah, well, let's hear it from the Crystal Palace manager, shall we? Roy Hodgson speaking yesterday about the new contract for Olise.
It's the best possible news that we could have. We've been concerned, as one is concerned when a club of Chelsea's stature start to take an interest in a player and, you know, suggest that a move to them might be the best bet. To lose to players like Wilf Zaha first and then Olise, that would have changed to some extent my perception of it all. So for me, it's a red letter day. I had a long chat with him and made it clear to him, of course, you know, how much I enjoy working with him, what respect I have for him as a player and what potential I think he has as a player. And in that, of course, I suggested that I thought that being at Crystal Palace and playing here would be the best option. But I also made it clear to him that I'm not going to put you under unnecessary pressure.
Roy Hodgson there talking about Olise, keen to stress that it was the player's decision to stay at Selhurst Park. I mean, let's talk about the player's perspective on this, because he's got a lot to weigh up. These opportunities, without disrespecting Crystal Palace, opportunities to join clubs like Chelsea don't come along very often. It's a huge decision from the player.
It is. I think it's really refreshing, actually. And just on Michael Olise, I think he's brilliant. Like, even in the pictures that we've just seen there, you're going to go and sign your deal, bucket hat, vest, gilet. It's just
So
a normal
casual,
day.
casual
A
vibes.
massive decision in this young man's career. We've seen with the infamous clip of, you know, when he's explaining the goal that he scored. I mean, if you look at him there, he just seems like he's so calm about things. You know, you go on his social media, there's one post. He hasn't even announced this himself. We don't even know what he thinks. You know, so that, I think...
He doesn't even have a profile picture
exactly,
on his Instagram page.
which is actually quite refreshing for a young player in this day and age, this generation. A lot of young players, because of the way the world's gone, are on social media, always trying to show things, show their perspective, show their lives, and he seems like quite the opposite to that. And he seems to have a really good temperament about him. But in terms of weighing up the move to go to Chelsea, he's had a lot to contend with. I think, like the people at Crystal Palace have spoken about, losing Wilfried Zaha, the spotlight has then gone on to Eze and obviously Michael Olise. And you look at all of the changes going on at Chelsea, all of the potential changes still to come at Chelsea, and rightly so, they've got a lot going on there. He's probably thought, well, they've got Madueke, they've bought him from PSV. He's young, similar profile to me. Bit of a different type of player, but in terms of age and potential, you've still got Raheem Sterling. There's a lot of moving parts at Chelsea. What's that going to look like for me under Mauricio Pochettino? Of course, he's good with young players, but I know for a fact that I'm going to be playing 95% of the games.
It's that guarantee, isn't it?
Exactly. Steve Parrish spoke about it in the piece he did with Sky Sports, that actually we can guarantee him that playing time is going to be one of the first names on the team sheet. But this is his decision. And also, he's still so young. You touched on it there. He can stay at Palace for another 2, 3, even if it was 5 years, if he really wanted to, and get into his prime. And if his development's gone the way that he wants it to, can easily get a big move. Of course, he's going to be on an improved contract financially, of course, by staying at Palace as well. So I just think it shows the right... It shows a different message, that not always when the bigger clubs come calling, it's the right move for you. I think it's just so refreshing to see him say, actually, for where I am right now, coming off the back of a long-term injury, a couple of injuries, I need to get back into this season, get a good season behind me in a new-look Palace that doesn't have Wilfried Zaha in it. And I'm happy to be here and develop. I think it's a really good move for him.
Sometimes players make those moves a little bit too early, don't they? And you can tell with his quite calm and measured temperament off the pitch, and we've just seen in the photos there, that he's someone that will have really considered those options. He really believes in himself, and he oozes that confidence when he's on the pitch. And every time you watch him, you can tell that he has that self-belief. But off the pitch, he comes across as a very unassuming and quietly confident figure. And sometimes these players make those moves a little bit too soon. They don't hit the heights and the potential that so many have expected of them in their early days. So just taking another season to assess his options, to see how he develops, to see what his strengths and weaknesses are, to use them and to use that to his advantage. I think it's a really, really smart idea for him and move for him.
And they looked really good under Roy Hodgson when he came back in. You know, 11 assists in the Premier League. I think that was 4th out of all Premier League players. If that's what he's doing in half a season with Roy Hodgson, what can he do with a full season where he's going to have more responsibility? And even now, where they're going to put more pressure on him, he's probably going to embrace that with him and Eze. That's an exciting proposition for the Premier League. And I actually picked them to be not overachievers, but in a sense of where people think that they're not going to achieve because they've lost Wilfried Zaha, such a high performer for them. I think they're going to be quite shocked at how well they do this season.
And key for Palace and Palace fans as well, that £35 million release clause now removed from the new contract. And from Palace's point of view, they'll be thinking, well, double You can get double that,
Easy,
right?
minimum. That's a bare minimum. I mean, if you look at the projection of Michael Olise, of the talent that he has, and try and match that up with a positive trajectory of where he should be within the next 2 to 3 years, you look at some of the fees going around for a lot of young players today, and there's no reason why Palace can't get in excess of double that for him, and to secure him on a long-term deal is absolutely perfect. And if you are a Crystal Palace fan, I think they've gone through so much transition recently to the point where they've actually gone back to Roy Hodgson, and he's come in and steadied the ship after Patrick Vieira and got them playing some exciting football, let the reins off some of these young players, actually, which wasn't really happening under Patrick Vieira. If you're a Crystal Palace fan, you're thinking, well, actually, we've managed the departure of a Crystal Palace legend really well. Not only did we manage to keep Wilfried Zaha for a very long time, I know he went to Manchester United but ended up coming back, and now he's gone at the right time and served his time at the club completely well. Well done to Wilfried Zaha, who deserves that time in his career now. But now we've got the future, and we haven't let go of one of the pieces of our future at the first time of asking, with another big club in London coming knocking the door for him. And he values us to actually stay here as well. So if I'm a Crystal Palace fan, I'm looking at it like, you know what? Steve Parish and the guys have actually managed this whole situation really, really well.
Well, get in touch if you want. Chelsea, Crystal Palace fans, #transfer talk. We're going to hear from Mauricio Pochettino a little bit later. He's holding a news conference around about 1 o'clock. We'll bring it to you on Total Football just after 1:30, I would think, here on Sky Sports News. Let's get to Liverpool next, and they are, of course, looking to add. Jurgen Klopp's side have made a bid for Stuttgart's Wataru Endo, and it's a deal that could rise to £21 million with bonuses. The player is in the country, and incidentally, he took the same private jet to fly into England that was used by Harry Kane to fly to Munich last week. I don't know, is that relevant?
It's got goals on it, that has. There you go.
Goals on the plane.
Pass the goals on to him.
So what does Endo bring to this Liverpool midfield, Sam?
I think it's actually a pretty smart signing in terms of the player profile that they're bringing in, the age as well. I know that they've missed out on some of the targets that they went in with Caicedo and Lavia, but at the same time, they definitely need this type of midfield that, you know, is guaranteed that stability and the availability as well. I was looking through some of his assists, some of his stats last season, and in the last 3 seasons in the Bundesliga, he won most of the aerial duels. He had the most clearances, most headed clearances, 1 possession, the most in the defensive third as well. You could see some of his stats there with his tackles, duels won, and I think he only missed 3 or 4 games due to injury as well. But he's also a Fabinho mould in the terms of he can play centre-back as well. He's decent going forward. He scored 3 goals, had 4 assists. I think he created over 50 chances in the Bundesliga as well, won the ball back 22 times in the final third as well. So he seems like he's an all-action midfielder that Liverpool were clearly missing when they played Chelsea. He has the age profile of Fabinho. Obviously, he's a bit older than Fabinho as well, but the fact that he's got that availability, I'm not saying that that's the only signing they need to make, but for 21 million in this market, when it's a desperate area that they need to fill, I think that's a good signing.
So that's on the pitch. What about off the pitch?
Yeah, it's really interesting if you look at Liverpool's departures this summer and some of the characters they've let go, let alone on the pitch, as you just mentioned, but off the pitch, they've let go of their captain in Jordan Henderson, their vice-captain in James Milner, other senior players that maybe didn't get as much game time, but in terms of the dressing room had really big influences, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Naby Keita. So bringing in someone who is a little bit older, who does break the mould of Liverpool's normal transfers and people they've been going after this summer is no bad thing. And if you speak to people who have watched him play a lot in the Bundesliga, they rave about him as a natural leader, a consistent performer, someone who is able to bring the levels of those around him up. And Sky Sports, on the article on the website, spoke to former teammate Mario Gomez, and he said he's an example of how team sport should look because of his attitude, someone who gives everything for the group. And that's exactly the kind of player who I think will elevate Liverpool this season. And yes, it might be more of a stopgap solution and not a long-term building for the future. But maybe for some transfers, that's okay, because Liverpool needed someone in that defensive midfield position. We saw in pre-season, we saw against Chelsea at the weekend as well, how much they were lacking in that area. So someone that can come in, have a lot of the attributes that Jurgen Klopp will be looking for in terms of an on-pitch perspective, but also off the pitch, provide that leadership, set the standards, be consistently available, because a lot of Liverpool's midfielders last year weren't consistently available in terms of their injury records, is no bad thing. So I think it's a signing that actually a lot of Liverpool fans might not be overly excited about right now, but 10 games into the season, when he's played 5 or 6 times and they feel like they're getting a lot out of him, they'll be quietly delighted with this one.
He might be one of those players as well that kind of elevates the players around him, not just the club, but he might not be one that puts up loads of numbers for Liverpool. I feel like we're almost doing him down before he signed, but you get what I'm saying, where he might elevate the players around him and enable them to perform at a high level.
Absolutely, and also if you think about Liverpool's sporting director who's in at the moment, George Matka, he knows the Bundesliga very well. This is not a signing that a lot of people are saying it's kind of come out of nowhere because the name hasn't been linked with Liverpool for a long period of time, but he'll have identified him as a target and been tracking him for a while. And yes, people are saying it's not plan A with Caicedo or B with Lavia, but I just think everyone needs to give him a bit of a chance. Yes, he's come in on a lower fee, but the flip side of that is it's a lot lower risk. He's not going to come in with all that pressure on his back. He's not going to be expected to elevate Liverpool for 5 or 6 seasons. Just next season, he needs to come in, do a good job, and we'll see what happens.
Is Endo enough in that Liverpool midfield? I mean, talked about the players they've been after in this transfer window to supplement that midfield area. So if they just get Endo in, is that enough for them?
I think from the outside looking in, I think they'll probably need another midfielder of that type as well, and number 6. I mean, you look at the ones they brought in Szoboszlai and McAllister, and the ones who are already there. You're looking at Curtis Jones, you're looking at Harvey Elliott. Of course, you've still got Thiago there, but there's a lot of injury concerns there with the availability of him. The young lad, Bajcetic as well. He's done really well, but obviously a lot of weight on his shoulders to come into that position in the Premier League as well. I think with Liverpool going for Lavia, that showed us their intent of what they wanted for the long-term plan. Young player, like you said there, Harriet, 5-6 years plus under Jurgen Klopp. So the Endo deal seems more of a short-term plan. So I think if there was to be an injury to him, if he's going to be the main 6, then you're sort of saying, well, we're maybe back to square one again. So I think there's also been shown that with the bids for Caicedo, that there's significant money to spend actually on some more players, and they haven't eaten up too much of that budget. So I would say definitely one more in, and potentially centre-back cover as well. You look at Joe Gomez and Matip. Joe Gomez has come in and done okay at times, but is he at the level of Konate or Van Dijk? Not so much. Matip has probably had his best years. And when you look at Trent as well, at right back, sometimes Gomez goes out to there. So could they look at potentially competition? I say competition, that's really difficult for Trent, but someone to come in should they want backup. Exactly. So, yeah, I dare say Liverpool fans would like a little bit more out of this window for sure.
OK. Jurgen Klopp is one of 13 Premier League managers we're going to hear from today as your Premier League weekend starts here. On the way next on Good Morning Transfers, we've got the latest from Everton. Will they have a new striker coming into the club before the window closes? Stay with us. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. A little bit of news to bring you. Romeo Lavia, we're expecting an announcement today from Chelsea on that move from Southampton, and the midfielder has posted on Instagram a goodbye message to Southampton. He says, "To Saints fans, as I say goodbye, I want to say a big thank you for everything you've given me during my time here. I've instantly felt the love from you all, despite us not achieving our shared goals," he says. "I'll never forget the belief the club and Saints all around the world showed me, and I hope I was able to repay the faith you put in me. I would especially like to thank all my teammates," he says, "and all staff members within the club involved, closely or not, for putting your arms around me since the day I walked through the Staplewood campus, and for all the daily work and help behind the scenes, making me become a better person." Athlete and football player Romeo Lavia says, "You have all played a massive part in making my integration into real professional football easier. I will be forever grateful to you. For those reasons, this club will always remain close to my heart. Good luck this season," he says, "and I look forward to seeing the club marching back to the Premier League where it belongs soon. Thank you, Saints." Romeo, that from Lavia's Instagram page, expecting an announcement today on his move from Chelsea. It'd be a £58 million move, 53 plus 5 is the deal. So that's one player on his way out of Southampton, and there could also be another departure as well. Everton have made a £12 million offer for Southampton's Che Adams, and this is what Russell Martin had to say earlier about that potential exit.
He's a fantastic character, really, really good player, and in the last week or two really started to, just his energy's been great and really started to see what he can bring us. So I would be really gutted to lose him, but at the same time, if he ends up going, it will be for the sum of money that the club deem appropriate, and the sum of money that I presume means we can then go and replace him. But ideally, you want to keep some players.
Yeah, Russell Martin says he does want to keep some players. We're going to talk about Southampton outgoings in a moment. Everton, though, their problems in front of goal have been well documented, haven't they? Scoring goals has been an issue for them for a long time now. So is Che Adams going to be the striker that is going to score them those goals that they need?
Yeah, you mentioned Everton's goal-scoring problems there. If you look at their statistics from last season, they scored 35 goals across the course of the Premier League. That was the second lowest, only to Wolves. So it is really that goal-scoring position they've been looking at as far back as last transfer window as well. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, obviously, when he is available, elevates that team so much and really provides that outball. But when he's not there, Everton really struggled to find the goals, and you saw that at the weekend against Fulham. Played really well, were creating a lot of chances, looked really good, and were on top for large parts of the game, but they just couldn't finish off those chances. So Che Adams is someone who I think would be able to come in, hit the ground running, has got that Premier League experience, is only 27 years old, so has a lot of potential and room to grow ahead of him as well. He's never been the most prolific goal scorer, and I think that's the one thing that Everton fans might be looking at and a bit concerned about. Although he's really hit the ground running this season, scored two goals in 2 games already. But if you look back to last season, 5 in 28, and then season 4, 7 goals in 30, and you can see here his stats on the screen as well: 148, 33 goals in that time, and also 15 assists. And if you look at the assist statistic there, you can touch on another side of his game, which is that he does link up attack really well. He can hold up the ball well. He's got a lot of attributes that I think would work really well with Sean Dyche's style. So as far as a safe option and a safe bet, someone who's got that experience, I think he is a really solid option, and one that Everton fans will probably be feeling quite excited about as they look to avoid battling for relegation like they have the last couple of seasons. They need that goal scorer. They need someone who can play alongside Calvert-Lewin when he is available, or on his own as a lone striker. I think Che Adams could fulfil both of those roles.
It's well documented, isn't it, the financial situation at Everton, so that we know they haven't got a lot of money to spend. They brought in Danjuma, Chamiti, Jack Harrison as well. So we know they're still interested in Wilfred Gnonto. Attacking players have been on the list this summer. So do they need him as well as a Che Adams? Do they need a Gnonto and a Che Adams?
I think so. I think with Everton being the second lowest scorers in the league last year, only scoring 34 goals in the Premier League, they need as many options as possible to get goals, as many forward players as possible. You can see there, other than Wolves, Southampton are all in a similar position in terms of goals scored last year in the Premier League. So that will be a real concern to only score 34 goals.
Gave them an extra goal earlier.
Yeah.
I'd be grateful.
Exactly.
For that. Be grateful.
So I think Everton fans, again, will want to be, avoiding relegation. Absolutely. They don't want to be going into the last day of the season, last couple of games of the season, scraping to stay in the league. And it's been highlighted even in the last game, the problem that they've got scoring goals. So you look at the signings there, potentially. Che Adams there could come in. I think Nonto absolutely still needs to come in because Jack Harrison, again, absolute workhorse, good on both feet, can provide goals as well. Not necessarily a high scorer, but will chip in. And I think Wilfred Nonto would be a player that would be fantastic for Everton. To add to that, the only difficulty and complexity surrounding that is Leeds are holding firm. They're saying no. He has been training away. Daniel Farke has been talking about it recently in the media. He's missed a couple of games already this season. He's recently signed a new deal. He's at the early stages of that. He's on a wage that they deem affordable, even though they've been relegated. And also, there's no release clause. So it puts him in a difficult position if Leeds do stand firm and hold strong. They've got aspirations to get back into the Premier League themselves, and they've already lost Jack Harrison to Everton, so they won't want to be losing him as well. So from an Everton perspective, absolutely Sean Dyche, I think, needs more attacking reinforcements. You spoke about Che Adams there. Workhorse, will work really, really hard and give a lot physically, but in terms of goals, is he that? I mean, Neil Maupay was kind of that mould. He's going to work hard, he's going to run around, he's going to give his all, but then they've struggled in terms of how clinical he is, how many goals can he bring. So that could be kind of a similar thing with Che Adams, if maybe a little bit step up, but in terms of not really sure how much goals he can score. So I think Nonto's going to be needed, but from a perspective of Leeds fans, they're going to be saying, we want to hold on to this player.
We're going to hear from Sean Dyche a bit later. You wonder whether Chamiti might be in line for his debut against Aston Villa, which is part of Super Sunday live on Sky Sports. Let's return to Southampton. We heard from Russell Martin a moment ago. Sold a lot of players in this summer transfer window. Do you think Southampton would have expected to sell this? I mean, they would have expected to sell, but would they have expected to sell this number of players this summer?
I think so, because I think a lot of people were saying when you look at their squad, it was quite interesting that they were in the position that they were in the Premier League, because they have definitely got quality in their squad. They added a lot of young quality to their squad as well, with Lavia, Salisu as well, Livramento before his injury. But these are players that I think if you're going to go into the Championship, you don't really want that toxic energy of players wanting to leave and wanting to have different adventures. You want players that, want to stick it out and know that they've got the ability to come back into the Premier League. And when you look at their squad, yes, they've lost their captain.
They've got some great players.
They've got some great players. They've got
Championship.
Nathan Teller still there, Kyle Walker-Peters, who's 26. Me and Flex were shocked that he's so young because he's so experienced. Alcaraz, Aribo, obviously Stuart Armstrong, who's obviously another leader for them as well. So they've still got a good core of players. And I think for Martins and their fans, they want players that want to be there at the team, and they want a challenge to come straight back into the Premier League. And when you look at their squad compared to the other Championship squads, it's still up there. Like, it's not all doom and gloom. Obviously, the window is still open, but at the same time, they can still bring in players that will add to their team. So I think it's not the worst case scenario for them to be in.
Russell Martin as well has spoken about incomings as well today, by the way, Southampton fans, and he's talked about Flynn Downs, expecting that one to happen, also saying that he wants at least another one or two after that. So hopefully, Southampton fans, you'll get some incomings to talk about as well over the next few days. So Romeo Lavia has said his farewells at Southampton as we await official confirmation of his move to Chelsea. Still to come here on Good Morning Transfers. We're going to head to the North East and get the latest from Newcastle. They look set to sign Chelsea's Lewis Hall on loan. Stay with us. Hi there, 14 days to go in the window. Chelsea fans have been getting in touch with us today. Hashtag transfer talk. Craig says Lavia will get lost in the crowded Chelsea midfield. This move will definitely affect his development, he says. And Kay also says, as a Chelsea fan, we still need to sign a goal scorer for us to actually compete. He says Jackson is there, but we still need one more striker who is prolific. That's from Kay. If you want to get in touch, it's hashtag transfer talk. Well, Newcastle and Chelsea are in advanced talks over a loan with an obligation to buy for Lewis Hall. Our reporter Keith Downey can bring us up to date with this one.
Yeah, it looks pretty close now, doesn't it? We've been reporting for the last 48 hours or so that Newcastle are in advanced talks for the Chelsea teenager Lewis Hall. He can play at left back. He can also play in central midfield as well. Incidentally, he actually made his Chelsea debut last season, last November, in the 1-0 defeat to Newcastle at St James's Park. He looked very good that night. I'd heard whisperings of his name during the summer as well, and I actually watched him. I was over there in America with both Chelsea and Newcastle in the Premier League Summer Series, and watched him train a number of times and actually be involved against Newcastle in a friendly. I remember looking at him and thinking, oh, that's the lad that made his debut. I've heard a little bit about him. He actually grew up a Newcastle United supporter, Lewis Hall, as well. So he does have connections to the football club. We do expect that one to be announced, if not today, over the weekend. It would be a loan with an obligation to buy. It's my understanding it's a loan for around £28 million, with that deferred payment left until next summer. Newcastle, as I've been reporting for a while now, are right at the top of their financial fair play restrictions. They don't have money to put down on the table and spend on a transfer, as Eddie Howe said this time last week at his press conference. So they've had to be creative, another word that he's used, and what they've done by this is they've essentially agreed or close to agreeing a loan deal for Hall to come in now, and the payment will be deferred till a later date. So £28 million is the agreement that they're talking about, with some future add-ons as well. A lot of money on the table for an 18-year-old, but obviously a player that Eddie Howe's recruitment staff here at the club really rate highly, and they feel that he can be part of the project here at Newcastle United moving forward, and following in the footsteps of Sandro Tonali and Harvey Barnes, who we saw both score, of course, on their Newcastle United debuts at St James's Park last weekend.
Keith Downey there at the Newcastle training ground for us. Lewis Hall with 9 Premier League appearances so far, so Newcastle fans may not have seen, well, they won't have seen too much of him. So what are they getting from Lewis Hall?
They're getting a really good player. Honestly, I love Lewis Hall. I think last season when you were watching Chelsea, one of the brightest sparks was Lewis Hall. He came into the team when things were looking quite turbulent, and people didn't really know what to expect when you saw him playing for the younger teams. He was playing in central midfield. He could play out wide or at left back, but he mainly played in centre midfield for the academy. But when he was at left back, you can just see a sense of composure and quality that you don't normally see from those type of players when they're coming into such a turbulent team and things are going wrong. So the fact that he's only got 9 appearances and so many teams have been interested, obviously he was linked with Crystal Palace as well, is a credit to him. And I think that what Newcastle are trying to build with, being in the Champions League and challenging for European spots and challenge for FA Cup and Carabao Cup as well, I think he's going to add a lot of quality to their side and versatility. Yeah,
and I mean, we're talking about Chelsea have lost Mason Mount this summer, so they've lost homegrown players. It's been a theme. A Chelsea fan's going to be disappointed with losing a player like Lewis Hall. You think about players that have come through the academy, bring that connection to supporters, the heart and soul of the club, if you like. So will Chelsea fans be disappointed with this?
Yeah, obviously they're all going to be on various different opinions, but in my opinion, I think if I was a Chelsea fan, I would be, because, OK, Chelsea got this new strategy with Todd Bowley, which they're clearly going down the line of buying young players for the future. But if you actually look at it, it's at the disposal of their own young players from their own academies. So it kind of has to pay off. I mean, it depends who the player is and what they've achieved. I mean, in the case of Mason Mount, he literally had come through the academy right to the top of club football and won the Champions League. That's literally the story that you'd want. That's literally everything. And I think what shines for Lewis Hall is to, you talk about when young players want to come into a team, the environment needs to be conducive to them. It needs to be stable. It needs to be nurturing. And that was everything but at Chelsea last year. So for him to shine in those circumstances shows you what he's got to offer. So, and as Sam just spoke, as a Chelsea fan, there he's gutted to lose him. So, I think there's reason for concern, because I just got a list here. Calvert-Lewin, Mason Mount, Ethan Ampadu, Tomori. We forget about that sometimes because he's gone on to do great things at AC Milan. Chalobah, Gallagher. There's now question marks about Callum Hudson-Odoi. I remember when he was tipped to maybe go to Germany for big money, and Chelsea gave him a big contract to try and keep him. Armando Baroja, Livramento, yes, from Southampton now to Newcastle, but it's a common theme. This isn't new for Chelsea fans. So I think now, if you're looking at it, it has to work, because on these long contracts where they're bringing in other young players from around Europe to supplement their own youngsters, well, that's you saying that you believe that players of this age are better from outside of our academy rather than sticking to them, but also balancing the books.
I think it's difficult, though, because I think, like you said, what Chelsea are doing now in terms of the last few windows, they've got in youngsters to, add to the quality of the team, but also for the future. And I think with a Lewis Hall, because of what he did in the Premier League last season, he's obviously going to be wanting guaranteed minutes. And with the signings that have been made and the signings that were made last season, with Cucurella coming in as well, Maatsen coming back from Burnley, who had a full season and helped him come back to the Premier League, he's now going to be, third or fourth choice at left back. And then you look at the midfielders that they brought in with Santos, Caicedo, Lavia. It will be very difficult for him to have an opportunity. And I know a lot of Chelsea fans are thinking a loan move would make a lot of sense for him, to see him start at least 35 games in a Premier League season. But I think it's just difficult where they have to, think about the finances and making sure that they're doing everything properly. You're going to have to look at where you can find value in some of these players and where they can move on. It's not going to be nice. Like Flex said, we've lost Mason Mount, who was a great player, and he added so much. But there is that you have to balance the books, and it has to make sense for the club.
And if it works, fantastic. If Chelsea go on to win top honours or some honours with Mauricio Pochettino, even in this season, there's a lot of uncertainty about how good Chelsea are going to be, but there's some encouraging signs. If this works, then I don't want to be disrespectful to these young players, but it will be forgotten about quite quickly, and the new batch of young players that have come in will make people forget about it, won't they?
And I think with youngsters as well now, you're talking about 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that want guaranteed minutes. Like years ago, you wouldn't really see that as much. You'd see players be okay with being in first teams because of the age of the players that are in that team. But now you're seeing them getting a lot more experience. The average age of teams in the Premier League have decreased a lot. So I can understand why a lot of these players are saying, you know what, I back myself. I want to get minutes. Let me go there and get them.
From Newcastle's point of view, advanced talks at the moment, not a done deal. But if Lewis Hall does come in, have they done enough for you to maintain their position as challengers for Champions League places?
Yeah, well, Eddie Howe said recently, we want the supporters to dream, and after their 5-1 win against Aston Villa at the weekend, you can see why they are continuing to dream this season. It looked like they picked up right where they left off with that front-footed, that aggressive style of football. And if you look as well in terms of how they've strengthened over the summer with some really clever signings as well. So you think about players like Livramento, who's strengthening that defensive area, Harvey Barnes, who you saw come on at the weekend and score as well on his debut, and then of course Tonali, who I think fans were raving about after just one appearance. Doesn't harm things when you score within 6 minutes of your Premier League debut, or 7 minutes or whatever it was. But I think they've strengthened not only the starting 11 with a player like Tonali, but they've really looked underneath that as well. How can they build that squad depth? How can they make sure they're in the best position possible to be competitive in the Premier League, but also in the Champions League? But that will be the big challenge for them. When the Champions League midweek fixtures kick in, how are they going to balance both of them? Are they going to have enough squad depth? Are they going to be able to stay competitive and perform at the top level in both competitions? That will remain to be seen. But the very early signs from this season are looking very good indeed. But as we know, teams in and around them have strengthened so much. We've been talking about Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea, how many players they've brought in as well. So it'll be a really difficult year to really guarantee those Champions League spot finishes. But they've set themselves up and put themselves in the best position possible.
Eddie Howe is coming up on Total Football here on Sky Sports News at 10 o'clock. On the way next, we'll discuss Jesse Lingard's future. Could we see him make a return to West Ham? Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. If you're a little bit late getting up this morning, the breaking news was that Theo Walcott has announced his retirement today at the age of 34. He left Southampton at the end of the season after their relegation. He's a two-time FA Cup winner, 270 appearances for Arsenal, 400-odd career appearances. His career defined in many ways by a transfer and what happened to him in 2006. Leaving Southampton, the first time that was, and moving to Arsenal. The shock England World Cup call-up then followed. A terrific career and really that early period for Theo Walcott almost defines the narrative around his whole career.
It does. I'm giving my age away a little bit here, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there's only a year's difference. He's going to Arsenal when I was in school. I was like, wow.
What are you doing?
Well,
Delivering newspapers.
Yeah. Hey, nothing wrong with delivering newspapers, by the way. One of my first jobs, actually. But I will say this: I feel like he was one of the original wonder kids.
Yeah.
And you know, you see players thrust into the limelight, really early age, a lot of high expectancy. And actually, we were talking off air, weren't we? Over 400 career appearances. I kind of wanted him to be in the Premier League 100 club. I think he got about 80-odd goals. I think for a player of his talent and longevity in the end, it would have been nice to see him in the Premier League 100 club, just to have that as well to add to his career. But when he got called up to the England squad and then, you know, being in Arsene Wenger, a sign-in, and it was just fantastic to see him do that at the time. And, I mean, one of the questions I'll ask you guys, do you think he fulfilled his potential?
I think you can say he did and didn't to a certain extent, because I think at Arsenal, going there at the age of 16 is a huge move. And like you said, one of the first moves that we ever saw, getting the number 14 shirt, I think that added a lot of pressure, because people are like, OK, Thierry Henry, 14, Walcott, 14, you've got to give goals. But he never really lived up to that expectation in terms of, you know, scoring week in, week out. But he added to an Arsenal side that at the time, I would say they were going for a rebuild, and he was a figurehead in that as well. And then the clubs he moved on to, Everton and Southampton, scored some big goals for Everton when they were trying to stay in the Premier League as well. But one thing I'd like to say is that people are shocked at the fact he's retired at the age of 34. He burst onto the scene at like 16.
Give him a break,
you did say off air as well, to be fair, that you thought maybe he'd go somewhere else for a year or two, a stint in another country perhaps. Are you surprised maybe that he's not done that?
Yeah, I am surprised. But then when I saw those stats about him coming at 16 and in and around the Southampton squad so young as well, I think he was their youngest ever player and the youngest ever player for England as well. It's a lot of time playing at the top of the game, exactly. So I'm sure he's just, you know...
You might just want to rest. You might just want to kick back for a year. 34 is not very old, is it? But when you've been going since 16 years old,
Yeah, he has said that he had offers to continue playing, including from Saudi, but it just wasn't right for him, and it felt the right time to hang up his boots. So congratulations, Theo
Wish him all the
Walcott,
best
on your career, and maybe we'll see you in the building.
Imagine, he'd be a good pundit.
Very good.
What about West Ham then next? They look set to be very busy in the coming 14 days. The club's technical director, Tim Stuyton, is in the Netherlands for face-to-face talks with Ajax over the signing of midfielder Mohamed Kudus. Also, Jesse Lingard is understood to be impressing the coaching staff at West Ham as he continues to train with the club to keep his fitness up initially. West Ham will continue to monitor his performance as they potentially then consider a short-term contract for Lingard. His representatives have fielded interest from England, Italy, USA, Saudi. But if West Ham decide to make him an offer, is that going to be his best option?
I think so. I was really gutted for him that he wasn't able to go after his really good spell there, where he had 16 appearances, scored 9 goals, had 5 assists as well, and it just looked like he'd found new life, and he had to go back to Manchester United, and because of that, you know, I believe he was told he was going to be a part of the side and get a lot more minutes, and that's not really what happened. And then we saw what happened with his career, and then going to Nottingham Forest, where they had signed so many players, and because of the year contract, you almost have to prioritise the players that you know are going to be around for longer. So that didn't work out. But I think the team is set up for him to thrive. He has a manager that's trusted him before and will trust him again. And for what they're trying to achieve this season with European football, they're going to need a bigger squad. So I think that move makes a lot of sense for him.
From West Ham's point of view, he would add good depth and in 4 positions, which is what they need, right?
Yeah, and they'll just hope that he can get back to the levels that he was at when he did perform really well at the club. But he didn't have a good season at Nottingham Forest. No one can deny that. I think it was 0 goals and 0 assists during his time there. He wasn't able to come off the back of a good spell and build on that. You can see here during his time, his record at West Ham was really, really good. 16 games, 9 goals and 5 assists during his time there. They'll really hope that he can come in and put up some of those numbers again. We know they've lost key players over the summer, notably in Declan Rice, so players that can come in and fill a bit of an attacking void and a leadership void, energy as well. I think he'd contribute a lot to that side, so they'll be hoping he can match those numbers again.
OK, Good Morning Transfers is back Monday at 9 a.m. Do join us for that. We are back, though, in a couple of hours. Transfer Talk back at midday today. And then the Transfer Show is here at 5 and at 7 tonight here on Sky Sports News. So we are back in a couple of hours for Transfer Talk, but on the way next, Total Football is here. Your football weekend is about to begin. We're waiting for confirmation of Romeo Lavia's arrival at Chelsea. Plus, there's a World Cup final to look forward to. We're with the Lioness.